King George VI famously declared, "The history of York is the history of England." I respectably disagree. With ghost sightings 303% higher in York than the rest of the UK national average, this places the city in its own creepy category. In 2002, the Ghost Research Foundation International concluded that, after a decade of research into paranormal activity, York has more ghosts than not merely any other city within the UK, but rather within any other city in Europe, earning it the deadly distinction of being the most haunted city in Europe. 12 years later, they did a follow-up study, casting the net further across the globe. In his interview with the BBC, the president of the foundation, Jason Carroll, stated that nowhere have they seen more ghosts than in York. With over 500 sightings officially indexed in the paranormal database, home to ghosts of the greatest longevity stretching back to ancient Roman times, and ghost stories in the thousands, York sunk 6 feet lower. Be forewarned and be prepared, for we are about to descend into the depths of an alleyway onto which no sunlight makes its way, and from where not even a scream can escape from. Lady Pecket's yard. Lady Alice Peckett, maiden name Pawson, dates from an ancient Yorkshire family stretching back to the 1400s. The family were merchants, although nobody knows exactly what kind. As well, no one knows the exact date of her birth or the exact date of her death, although it was said to be in 1759, and the courtyard took on her name in the 1780s. But during her lifetime, she lived in this corner unit right here with her husband, John Peckett. And why they lived so close to the Golden Fleece is because he was the owner of the Golden Fleece. And in addition, in 1702, he was also the Lord Mayor of York. And York has a little civic custom that states the Lord Mayor, he is that for a year and a day, but his wife, she is a lady forever and aye. There is a reason Lady Alice Peckett is at the top of the list of the ghosts that spooked the most haunted inn in England. On one occasion, the builder Ronald Lumley was working on the exterior of the pub, and in exchange he was taking room and board. And one night as he was asleep, and a silvery grey cloud sliced through the eye of the moon, he was suddenly woken from his dreams by the sounds of footsteps that paused in an eerie, almost endless silence just outside his bedroom door. Fearing intruders, he jumped out of bed straight for his toolbox, clenching his wrench, thrashed it back, opened the door. He was met with nothing on the other side. And with a yawn and a last glance, he then turned to go back to his bed. But then into the corner, where only cobwebs linger, the slight shuffling of footsteps resounded. He grabbed his torch. As he swung it around, its light scattered flocks of shadows that fled sideways across the floor and scurried up the walls. His eyes darted all around, yet nothing could be discerned except the sounds of the floorboards, creaking with each step. And he followed the sounds down the hallway, staring blindly into the unliberated depths of its darkness. His unseen horror attributed to Lady Alice Peckett. And what I want to draw your attention to is the building right behind me at 5 College Street. And in the 1950s, a family had moved into this small stone house. And in that tiny window right there, that was where the children's room was. And one night as they were asleep and a dense fog strangled the city, they were suddenly awoken from their dreams by the sound of sobbing coming from the direction of their window. The next morning, they had told their parents who, with an air of indifference and annoyance, were numb to their children's declarations, passing them off as mere fictitious configurations rooted in the inventiveness of the night, until the night they were woken by the sounds of the sobbing. Leaping out of bed, panicked with dressing gowns wildly flapping, they rushed to their children's aid, swung the door open, cast the light over them, and found both their children soundly asleep, softly nestled in the comfort of their own beds. But with the door wide open, the sobbing intensified to a full swollen heaving. Unnerved, the parents panned the light over the foot of the bed, across the writing desk to where the sounds were emanating from, at that tiny window, where they were struck by an abrupt cataclysm as they bore witness to a horror that violated the very laws of nature. What they saw was the figure or silhouette of a little girl, hands and face pressed against the window, looking outwards, sobbing. For this tiny stone house conceals an awful secret, a terrible truth waiting to be unveiled. The new residents only caught a mere glimpse of the deplorable complex brooding from within inside their own home. And as we pry back this dark veil, what we find is a story, though awful, is neither unique to York nor, sadly, to this house. June 4th, 1604, an enemy had descended upon the city. Nobody knew what it was, what it looked like, or where it came from. Nobody knew how it was so easily able to slip past the city walls, which have reliably defended York against some of the largest and most powerful armies of the day. What they did know is that it had been here before, and whatever this entity was, it was one that was as merciless as it was evil. So effective in its evil, it disseminated over half of York's population during a previous rampage in the 1300s, claiming up to 10,000 lives. A chronicle compiled at St. Mary's Abbey here in York once read, there was hardly enough left living to take care of the sick or bury the dead. The culprit would not be properly identified for another 275 years, as it was unleashing its third round of havoc across Europe. Its name, Yersinia pestis, a microscopic organism, a bacterium, the causative agent of the plague illness, better known as bubonic plague, black death, or the great mortality. And it was back, more virulent than ever. The plague went coursing throughout York's narrow, twisting, winding streets, full of dung heaps, cesspits, and open gutters, where chamber pots were regularly dumped and wild animals roamed freely. The city was an open sore. With so many places for the plague to fester, the infection spread rapidly, and on its mission of cruel annihilation, it wound up here, upon the doorstep of 5 College Street. And in the early 1600s, this was a servants' quarters, occupied by a family of 3, a father, a mother, and their 7-year-old daughter. One of the parents quickly contracted the plague illness. With the mortality rate peaking at 1 in 3, authorities took no chances and followed the standard protocol of barricading the family on the inside, and then on the outside, locking the front door. And upon that door, painting a large red cross with the accompanying phrase, "Lord, have mercy on our souls," meant to serve as a plague warning, to let all those know that the inhabitants were infected and to dare not enter. Yes, their daughter had wondrously survived, and from that tiny window, she began shouting to anybody in earshot that although her parents had died of the illness, she was free of it and demanded to be let out. But all those who approached the house would have seen the cross, and so knew their own fate. So they ignored her and passed her by. And then one day, the yelling, banging, kicking, screaming, and shrieking all stopped. A lead pipe of silence fell over the Minster precinct, now a godless quadrant. 6 weeks had passed. The authorities axed through the door, splintering their makeshift cross into 1,000 pieces. As they entered the city's newest mausoleum, they were suddenly assaulted by a thick and revolting stench of death. So heavy in the air, it was almost as though the whole house had been plunged into the depths of the ocean, and they were moving in a liquid slow motion through some syrupy necrosis. Downstairs, they found the parents, rotted from the inside out, having clearly succumbed to the plague. And upstairs, they found the little girl. She was facing out towards the windows and so had her back turned towards the inspectors. When one of the officers approached her to notify her that the quarantine was lifted and it was finally safe for her to leave, he put his hand on her shoulder. But at this moment, she had tilted backwards woodenly and dropped to the floor, slumped aslant against the wall like a rag doll, rigid and dead. Around the window frame were thin, jagged lines of dried blood, zigzagging in all directions, tracked with bits of broken fingernail and pieces of flesh torn off from her trying to claw her way out in a desperate panic. All the evidence pointed to the undeniable yet appalling conclusion that this little girl had not died from the plague, but rather starvation. And it said that she haunts the place now, with a desire to be free so intense she took it with her to the grave and beyond. Many that pass by that tiny stone house still to this very day see the hands and face of a little girl pressed against the window, mournfully and longingly looking out into the outside world that she was never to experience again, except the sound of her sobbing, echoing throughout the park, echoing throughout the ages. What's the maddest story in York? Well, probably the one that we're standing in right now, Mad Alice Lane. This is probably one of the best examples we have here of an urban legend. And according to the legend, in 1825, there was a woman that resided here by the name of Alice Smith. And she lived with a real nasty, brutal husband. Tired of his constant torment and abuse, one day she retaliated by poisoning him, which resulted in his death. The whole experience was so traumatic for her that she then went insane, and according to the legend, she was then executed. But not for the crime of murder, for the crime of insanity. And then it's said that a ghost is said to haunt the alleyway or look down from one of the windows. Now, I feel like I could be flippant towards a story that I actually think would be very tragic otherwise, if there was some element of truth to it. England and Wales kept relatively accurate records of who was executed within the 1800s. Within about a 100-year period, there was only 2 women executed in the country that had the name Alice. Neither had the surname Smith, and neither were executed in York. Indeed, throughout York's entire history, nobody with the name of Alice Smith has ever been executed. So, strike one, I guess. As to 1825, I have really no idea how that date entered the equation, or even really how the name Smith entered it. Because when I look at the name Mad Alice, to me it seems like Alice could be the last name, and Mad would be short for Madeline, maybe an alternative spelling of Maud, maybe Madge, a set of initials, an acronym, or even a title like Madame. So not only do we not know when this person is we're looking for, we also don't know who it is we're looking for. And as for the bit on the crime of insanity, that was never a crime here. So the story really doesn't make any sense. But one historian, Naismith, he has a whole alternative account. His source are the locals. They said that in the 1800s there was a woman that resided here by the name of Alice Smith, but she got the name Mad, because whenever anybody tried to walk through the Snickle Way, she'd jump from her doorstep, cuss at them, scream at them, and chase them away with a broom, and that is who Mad Alice is. So I will leave that up for you guys to decide.